This is Gemara Yevamos Daf Lamed Vav. All the learning has been generously sponsored as a Chosi Neshama for Miriam Bas Eliezer HaKayin, whose yahrzeit is today in Yud Aleph Nisan. The learning of the entire Chabura should bring Miriam Bas Eliezer HaKayin to a higher place in Gan Eden Shalmaila as the Chosa Ta'ira, the Chosa of the entire Chabura learning. I'm sure Miriam Bas Eliezer HaKayin is looking down and Shaping Nachas as her children are sitting and learning the Daf Yomi. The learning the entire Chabura should bring incredible Chos to Miriam Bas Eliezer HaKayin as she's oila to higher in place in Gan Eden Shalmaila. Learning should be an incredible shidduch for Yisrael Chaim and Devayish Kamasiba Bas Pararachel Shloimeh ben Libi Zahava Oifek ben Teli Sheva ben Chaya Bluma Yehudis Bas Asima Malka. They should all find their shidduch Chagoyna Bekara Imam. Eshal learning should be a chizur for Shlema for Shmuel Yosef ben Henya Freda Shmuel ben Tilan of Talitim Mecheles and Nachama Bas Yiva Sar Bluma Bas Mendel Chaim Moshe Yoshua ben Milka Bas Sheva Figa Bas Shira Chana. We're holding on Lamed Hayam and Beis, and we're in the middle of a lengthy machlokes between Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish. If you're looking on your screen, you'll see right on the top of the Amud when the Gemara began. The Gemara is at a case of Achayleitz Lemeuberes Vehipila, and we're trying to figure out what is the status of a Chalitza or a Yibun done at a time that the woman is pregnant. Rav Yochanan says it does not work. Rav Yochanan says it does work. Reish Lakish says it does not work. To show for those who like the picture from yesterday, Achilitz Mubaris Ve'ipila, Rav Yochanan says you do not need a new Chalitza because the Chalitza, the Yibum Mubaris works. Whereas Reish Lakish says no, you need a new Chalitza. The Chalitza Mubaris and a Bia Mubaris does not work. And now says the Gemara towards the bottom of the Amid, Misvei, before we have a side debate almost in Abaye and Rava, how they're going to interpret this machlokes Reish Lakish and Rav Yochanan. First, the Gemara begins with another kasha similar to yesterday. Misvei says the Gemara are about 8 lines, 10 lines at the bottom. The first word of the line is Yikayim, the last word of the line is Misvei. So Misvei, they asked on Rav Yochanan, again Rav Yochanan, who said that you do not need a new chalitza because the chalitza, the yibum of mubaris works. So Meisvei asked the Gemara, Koine says yivim toivim some mubaris if someone marries Yevam, and then it comes out that she is pregnant, sarasa, then the Sarah is not allowed to get married. Why can the Sarah not get married? Usually the story is when Yibum and Chalitza is done on one Yevama, the Tzara is mutter l'shuk. Over here, when we find the Yevama to be Mubares, then the Tzara cannot get remarried. Why not? Shema Yevalad ben Kayama, because maybe the child will be a viable child. Says the Gemara, pause. The exact opposite. If the child is a child, then what happens? That means there was no yibum, there was no chalitz, and everyone's mutter. So maybe the child will be a viable child? No. Elaima, says the Gemara, you're right. And of course, after we figure out the wording, figure out the case of the brisa, we'll come back to be a kasha. And Rabbi Yochanan, Elaima, says the Gemara, Shema lo ye'avla ben kayam. Maybe the child will not be a viable child, and that's why the Tzara cannot get married, even though the Yevama did Yibum, but because she was pregnant, maybe the child will not be a viable child, and therefore the Tzara cannot get married. So now the Gemara articulates the Raya. Like you, Rav Yochanan, Bia, and if the marriage, the consummation of the marriage, the Bia of the Yevama is a good Bia, why can the Tzara not go get married right now? Who cares if the child is not a good child? Who cares if the child is not viable? Let the child not be viable. But the bia of the Yevama itself will work, even though she was Mehubares, and therefore the Tzara, the co-wife, should be mutter. So says the Gemara, Amar Abaye. So now, not like the previous two questions in which Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish held their own and reinterpreted the Braisa as being not a kasha, says Abaye, we have to go back and we have to reevaluate what is Shitas Rav Yochanan. Says Abaye, let me tell you what the machlekes is. Says Abaye, you got it wrong. There is no debate, Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish, when one has relations with the Yevama while she is pregnant. No one holds that is going to work. Keep leaking the machlokes is only bechalitza. They're only debating whether the chalitza of the mubaris works. Rav Yochanan said chalitza mubaris shema chalitza mubaris loy shema bia. Rish Lakish have a bia mubaris loy shema bia chalitza mubaris loy shema chalitza. So Abaye learns that the machlokes from yesterday is a bit smaller. It's not a large machlokes both by chalitza and by yibum. Rav Yochanan saying they both work. Rish Lakish saying they both do not work. No, says Abaye. Beya, everyone holds does not work. The machlokes is simply by chalitza. Reish Lakish says it does not work. Rav Yochanan says it does work. Omar Lei Rava says Rava Tabaya Manavshach. Says Rava Tabaya, I have a problem with what you're saying. Ibia mi'uberish mabia. Chalitza mi'uberish mabia. Says Rava, as he'll prove in a moment, the two go hand in hand. If the bia is good, the chalitzas work. Why? Says Rabbi, where do I know this from? As we turn over to today's Daf Lamed Vav. Says Rabbi, you can't split this hair. You can't say that according to Abaye, the bia mu'uberes does not work, but the chalitza mu'uberes does work within Shitas Rabbi Yochanan. No, says Rava, the two go hand in hand. If the bia doesn't work, the chalitza can't work, and if the chalitza can't work, the bia can't work. You cannot split the two up. Ella, Amar Rav. Then we have a kasha though. The problem is we're stuck with a kasha and Rav Yochanan. Ella, Amar Rav. You know we're going to answer Rav Yochanan. Gamar. Hakoines yevimta v'nimsu muberes. This is the brayso Rav is going to reinterpret. What does the brayso mean when it says if someone marries the yavam and you find that she is muberes alezuloi harizuloi tinasi sarasa shemi vlad ben kayama. This is the words of the brayso that the tzara, the kohev, cannot go get married. Why? Because the child might be a viable child. Ubias muberes loy shma bia v'chalitza muberes loy shma chalitza. Explains Rava, the bia nor the chalitza is going to work, and therefore, if the child is a viable child, then what happens? What happens is that there was no need for the bia or the chalitza. It was all for naught, and then the tzara could go and get remarried. And the child does not pater until that child is born. So says Rava, the way that we learn up this brayso, when the brayso said, "Hakoines yevimta," and you find her to be muberes, the tzara is not let it go and get remarried. Why not? Because the child might be viable. Explains Rava, what's going on over here is that the yibum and the chalitza of a muberes, when there is a viable child within her, is not a good yibum and a chalitza. Therefore, the only way the Yevama and the tzara will be mutter is what? Is when the child is born. So Rava is creating a new chiddush over here. Rava's learning that in a normal case, said Rava, the even chalitza go hand in hand. We have a machlokes Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish. Says Rava, if the child ends up being a viable child, then it all has to do with the child. You got to wait for that child to be born in order to see whether the tzara can get married or not. And says the Gemara, Tani Kavase de Rabba, we have a brayso that explicitly explains like Rabba, Akanis Yivimta V'nis Muberes, Elo Tinas Sarasa Shemi Avla Ben Kayama, Vein Bia V'chalitza Boiteres, Elo Vlad Poiter. The Bia and the Chalitza does not work by the Muberes. What works? Just the Vlad. V'avlad, when the baby is born, in Patrat Yosef Yira Elam. And explains the Gemara, and that is the raya to Rava. Before we continue, let's just see this, hopefully give a little extra clarity in the machlokes. On the left side, you see that Abaye is learning that the machlokes Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish is only by chalitza and not by bia. Whereas Rava says, no, both chalitza muberes, Rava learns the arguing in both cases, and chalitza muberes shema chalitza, bia muberes shema bia. But when there is a child there, then you have to wait for that child to be born. Says the Gemara, let's go a little bit deeper into this brayso, which is going to end up being now a kasha on Reish Lakish. What did the brayso say? The brayso said there's a baby. Their mommy's mubaris. The chalitza, the ibum doesn't work. You gotta wait for that child to be born. So now, says the Gemara, let's articulate this. This is going to be a kasha and Reish Lakish. We see clearly that the only way that the co-wife goes and gets remarried is why? Because the baby born might be a viable child. So what do we see? The obvious implication that if the baby is not a viable baby, then what? The tzara is pater. That's a kasha on Reish Lakish, because according to Reish Lakish, you should have to do again Yibum and Chalitza right now. Reish Lakish will tell you, Achikani, this is the way to learn the Braisa. Let's just see one Rashi over here. Rashi, 3 lines into the narrow lines, Rashi says, so if the child's not a good child, again, this is reminding us of everything we learned yesterday. What does that show you? That this mommy did not have a baby inside of her. This mommy is a regular Yevamos that needs Yibamu. And everything should be fine. This is the way to learn the Braisa. The tzara should not go get married. Why not? Because maybe the child will not be a viable child. V'chalitza muberes lo yishma chalitza ubiya muberes lo yishma biya. Says Reish Lakish, it doesn't work to be in the chalitza. V'im toimar. Says Reish Lakish, you have to insert these words into the Braisa. Perhaps you'll suggest maybe there's a Rav. The Rav should tell you that if the mother is pregnant, that what? We should assume the baby will be a good baby. We Rav Nashim Vlad Ma'al Yaldan. And therefore, the Sarah should be able to go and get remarried. Vlad Einai Paiter Ache Yata Lavir Oilam. And that's where the Braisa is telling me that no, the Vlad does not pater until it comes out, until the baby is born. So Reish Lakish is telling us that this last phrase, when the Braisa taught us, Vlad Einoi Poiter Achiyot Lavir Oilam, is not just telling us a continuation of the Braisa, that if the child would be a viable child. Rather, it's telling you something else. It's telling you that maybe we can answer a kasha. Maybe there's a Rav. Maybe the Rav should dictate that this mother should be able to allow the tzara to get married. Says the Gemara, no, you have to wait for the child, because the Vlad does not pater. It is getting late, but let's just see one more Rashi in this teretz of Reish Lakish. It's a little bit difficult. Of course, Kalaimar, when Rashi says, means it's not the simple reading. Realize what Reish Lakish just did. The Braisa, in the simple reading of the Braisa, said Shema Yehi. Reish Lakish says, no, you have to read a Shema Lo Yehi. Why? What do you do with the Seifa? The Seifa sounds like that the whole Braisa is talking about if the baby is born and it's a viable baby. If it's a viable baby, then everything should be fine. There should be no need for you and Chalitza. So Reish Lakish says no. The Braisa is really talking about when the baby is going to be a Nafil. It's not going to be a viable baby. That's the reason why the Reisha of the Braisa, the end of the Braisa, is referring to when it's a viable. And it's coming to answer a kasha. Again, maybe you'll tell me it's coming to teach you the chiddush that even though there's a Rav, so one would think they could get remarried right away. No, you have to wait for the baby to be born. Omar Rav Elazar, says the Gemara about 20 lines down. The first word line is Avir Ha'olam. Says Rav Elazar, Efshar Isa L'Had Reish Lakish. Is it possible that we have this din of Reish Lakish, and we don't have it learned in a Mishnah? Where does Reish Lakish get his din from? So it says the Gemara, Nafik, they went out, the dock, and they checked, and what did they find? Va'ashkach. And Lamaisa, they found a Braisa that works with Reish Lakish. A woman goes overseas with her husband and the co-wives. And what happens? They come back and they tell her, your husband has been after. She's not allowed to get married. She's not allowed to do yibam ad until when? She ascertains shema mu'uberes yitzarasa. She has to be careful and make sure that maybe the co-wife is pregnant. So says the Gemara, I understand why she's not allowed to go and do yibam. Maybe the tzara will have a child, and if she goes and does yibam, that's a dreadful avera, as we keep on pointing out. She's not allowed to marry her brother, her brother's brother, her husband's brother. So says the Gemara, you're right. So you're right, you can't do yibum. Ella loy tachlut amai. Why could she not do chalitza? Bishlama tachlut b'seich tes v'tinase b'seich tes. And there's a bunch of girses over here. Some change the test to gimel, but let's just read it the way that it is. Bishlama tachlut b'seich tes v'tinase b'seich tes loy. I understand that she cannot do chalitza. She cannot get remarried within 9 months. Why? Hainu safek. Because that's the question that maybe there's a pregnancy here that we do not know about. I don't understand. This Brisa said what? It said they tell her Meis Bayilech, and what did it say? Period. You can't get married. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. Do chalitza within 9 months, and after 9 months, let her get married. What's the problem? Why does it sound like you have to keep on waiting? So says the Gemara, according to what you're saying, so according to what you're saying, either way the price is difficult. After 9 months, do chalitza and get married. So either way, how do you learn the reading of the brisa? Rather, leave this brisa out that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Kroz likuna. This Bryce says no shaykhis. Really, you're right. It could be a raya, it can't be a raya. So why does this Bryce say she can never go and get remarried? For a different reason. What's the reason? They explain this Bryce that maybe there will eventually be a child, and what's going to happen is they're going to have to announce with regard to kahuna. You need a kroz likuna. Says the Gemara Shkoyach Lizracha. So go and announce it. What's the problem? You're telling me even after 9 months she can't go and get married. Why not? You just announce whether there was a baby or not. Explains the Gemara, you know why not? That's how concerned we are. Someone might see them do the chalitza, but they will not hear about the announcement, and therefore, and it's going to look like she's a chalutza because she did chalitza, and then she went and married a kohen. Now, the real reason why she was allowed to marry the kohen was why? Because she was not a chalutza. Why was she not a chalutza? She did chalitza. No, because the other wife was pregnant and the other wife had a full baby. If the other wife had a viable child, what's the halacha? The halacha is there's no yibum, there's no chalitza. So what's this woman? This woman's a nothing. She's just a woman without a husband. Her husband died. Okay, so she can go marry a kohen, no problem. But because someone might know about the chalitza and not know about the eventual cross, the announcement that there was a baby, that's why this Bryce is different. That's what this Mishnah says. She cannot go and get married. Amar le Abaya, says Abaya, another reason why we don't like this raya. Did the Mishnah say, do not do yibum, do not do chalitza? The Mishnah said, do not do yibum, do not get married, do not do yibum. Beloi chalitza. What it means is without chalitza, but if you did chalitza, you're right, we let her get married. Hachanami desharya. So therefore, we would allow her to get remarried after the 9 months. So 2 different reasons why we can learn Pshat in this Mishnah and not have a problem. So says the Gemara, we're still looking for a source in which we have a Mishnah which is teaching us like Reish Lakish. So Tanya Kabasi de Reish Lakish, about 7 lines from the bottom of Lamavavam and Aleph. Ha'chayleitz le'meuberes v'hibila. If someone does chalitza to a case in which she's mubarak, she's pregnant, v'hibila, and she miscarries, sri chalitza menachem, she has to do a chalitza again from the brothers. Amar Rava, helchas l'kavasei de Reish Lakish b'hani tzlas, and that's a raya, of course. That's an explicit raya, like Reish Lakish, that even though a chalitza was done, even though there was an eventual miscarriage, and therefore there was a necessity to do chalitza, we see chalitza mu'barish me chalitza like Reish Lakish. We see the chalitza, opposite. We see she needs a new chalitza from the brothers. We see chalitza mubaris like shmei chalitza, a clear raya like Reish Lakish, and comes along Rava, and Rava paskins indeed. Hilchos like Reish Lakish, we paskin like Reish Lakish. Chada hadamar. Number one, the psak of Reish Lakish is like we just said. What's the psak like we just said? That if one does chalitza lemubares, you need a new chalitza. That the chalitza of the mubares is not a good chalitza like Reish Lakish, Chad Adamar, and Idach, and then we're going to have two other random cases. So number one, Idach, the Tanaim learned in the Mishnah. HaMechalik nechasav al piv. Someone is giving out his possessions, Baal Peh, he's giving them out to his children, Rib Lechad, Umil Lechad, he gave more to one son, he gave less to another son, V'ishlem es HaBachar, and he gave equal to the Bachar and the other brothers. Tavar of Kayamim, you're allowed to give away what you want, you're allowed to give as much as you want. And the reason is going to be, as we'll see in a moment, because he's giving it as a gift right now while he's alive. But if the father says, I'm giving you equal in Yerusha, that does not work. However, if he wrote whether the beginning, the middle, of the end of the document, those are the critical and those are the key words. If he wrote that I'm giving you the children, a different brother, and the Bachar equal, and he writes it's a matana, Devar of Kayamam, even if later in the document he maybe also mentions how he wants it to be a Yerusha, it works. Because when you say it's a matana, then it works. Ve'amar Reish Lakish, and this is going to be the psak that Rava is saying, we asking like, as we turn over to Lamavavam Mebeis, La'ilam La'ikanachi, Aymar Ploini, Uploini Yarshu Sada Ploinis, Uploinis Shenesatlam Bim Matana, Virarsham. Says Reish Lakish, you have to say explicitly that I'm giving this and this one, and this and this one, and I'm giving them the matana, and then they should inherit them. So the chiddush is that it does not work unless he explicitly labels the Yerusha as a matana. That's when he's going to be able to give all the brothers equal, and this is going to be a larger discussion in Gemara Bava Basra, but that is the psak right now, like Reish Lakish. And we continue Ve'edach L'Tanan, and the third case that we're going with, like Reish Lakish, like Gemara Bava Kama, if someone writes over all his possessions to a child of his, but he writes it over to the kid after he dies. The father can't sell these properties because he gave it to the child. But the child can't sell them either. Why not? Because it's in the possession of the father. Because the father said you only get them after I die. Let's see, the father indeed went and sold them like he should not have done. The halacha is they're sold until he dies. Because after he dies, they're not his, they're his kids. If the child sells it, the buyer gets nothing until the father dies. And we learned on this brayza, if the child sold it, and then the child died. Does the borrower get anything? The son sold a property that his father gave him, after that the son is only going to get after the father died, but then the son died. And now the borrower wants the property when the father dies. Can that buyer, not the borrower, can that buyer get the property? That's a machlokes Rav Yechon Reish Lakish. Why not? Kini beis kini aguf dami. Reish Lakish Amar kana lokech kini beis lav kini aguf dami. Reish Lakish says the buyer, not borrower. Excuse me, I keep saying the same thing. The buyer gets it. Why? Because kini beis lav kini aguf, because the fact that the father has the kinyan beiros is not substantial, it's not kinyan agof, and therefore when the father dies, the buyer will be able to get the property even though the son is no longer here. And now we continue, we're about 10 lines down, the two dots, Ein Havlad Shel Kayam. Back into the Mishnah, we said that if you marry the Yevamos who's pregnant, and the child is not a viable child, then we said you let us stay married, etc. So Tana, we learned in the Mishnah, Mishum Rabbi Eliezer, Amr Yaitse Beget. No, you're not allowed to stay married. The halacha is, you have to divorce this woman. And again, let's remind yourself, the child was not a good child. I shouldn't say not a good child, excuse me. The child was not a viable child. So therefore, the fact that you married the Yevama should be fine. Why should it be fine? Because you did Yibam. It's true, you started off at the wrong time. But says Rabbi Eliezer, no, you must, and we force you to give a get. And as we're going to see in a moment, this is a din derabanan. Amar Rava, Rameir Rav Lazar, Amru Davar Echad. This din of Rav Lazar is just like Rameir. Rav Lazar Hadamar. Rameir is what the Tanya. If someone's wife is pregnant or is nursing, and that person dies, or that person divorces her, someone else is not allowed to marry that woman until the amount of time passes. I mean, that is 24 months. A Mubarak till we know if she, Mubarak till she gives birth, because we're nervous about the sakana of the child. Vim Nasa says the Braisa Yaitzi. You have to divorce that woman, you can never get remarried to her. You have to divorce her. When the time comes, the baby's born, or the 24 months passes of nursing, then you could go back and you could remarry her. So Amrlei Abai. So and this is what the Gemara is suggesting is the same machlaikas as you see over here. The Gemara is saying v'yolda. If the Vlad is a Kayam, if him in a Vlad Shel Kayam Yikayim, you get remarried. And we learned in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, no, you cannot get married. You have to be Yoitze Beget. And over here, Daf Yomi speaks out from Rashi that what's going on over here, it's a Kenas. Why are we Kenasing you? Because you did an Isser. You married this woman at a time there was a potential Isser Ishes Ach. So we tell you to get divorced. And we're saying that this is the same thing as if someone goes and marries the Mubarak and of his friend. The Rameir says, Yaitzi, you have to get divorced. V'lo yachzor elamis. Why? Because it's the same kenas, because you went and you got yourself involved in a suffix situation of Isser. So that is how the Gemara Rava said, our din of Rav Eliezer, that we forced this woman to get divorced because she got involved in potential Isser, it's just like Rameir. So Amrlei Abaya says, Abaya, 1 second. Go a little bit deeper and you'll see the cases are not comparable. Mimai, Dilmaloi, Ad can look Rav Eliezer Halcha, El Misham to come Pagab is your Ishes Ish and Achda Raisa. By us, you're playing with fire, it's a potential Daraisa. I've lost some Darabanan over the years, and it's a Darabanan. Kirabanan Svirale. And therefore, maybe they all like Darabanan, that there is no Kanas, and you could eventually get remarried. Inami, Ad can look Rav Meir Halsam, El Misham Darabanan. Maybe over there it's a separate din. There's a din Darabanan, you can't marry this woman because she's pregnant. You can't marry this woman because she's nursing. And therefore, because the din Darabanan saying not to marry her, we find often that Darabanans we have to be more careful about because we don't want to treat them lightly. So the Chachamim came along and they themselves said, we're being more machmir. You can never remarry this woman because you were over on the din Darabanan. In our case, midaraisa. It's a din daraisa that you're playing with. So maybe they will be payri. So says the Gemara, says Abaye, the two cases are not necessarily totally zeh b'zeh. You could hold over there like the Chachamim, and by us, not that you have to get divorced, and therefore the din d'Rabbanan by us forcing this woman to get divorced is not necessarily of Rav Eliezer. It's not the same machlik as Rameir over there. Amar Rava l'divrei Chachamim yotzia beget. Says Rava in that brayso. So what do the Chachamim mean? The Chachamim said you have to yotzia. What does that mean? It means yotzia beget. It doesn't mean you're just a leaver. You need to get divorced. And Amar Marzucha dekinam dekani yotzi v'lo yikatani yafri. Shema Mina. The Lashon Yaitzi says Gemara means you have to divorce her because you were over on this Darabanan. You went and you married her at a time that she was Mubaris when she was Meinekes. Therefore, we force you Yaitzi to divorce her.